All right, hey everybody, and welcome back to BAN-KAST. For the holiday season, I have my Christmas tree up back here. I mean, it's not Thanksgiving yet, but, you got to put your Christmas tree up before Thanksgiving, because that's just normal in the United States, I guess. Anywho, we have a great, family-friendly holiday special. For all you Bleach fans out there, this will be Bleach 1,000-Year Blood War Arc, Episode 34, Baby Hold Your Hand. And we have one of the stars of the show right here, Pernida Punkjus. And as the caption says, just what is that thing? That's basically this entire episode. Like, honestly, the first half of this is just Kenpachi really wanting to cut this thing up, and everybody is just wondering, what is this thing? What does it do? It's this shadowy being that wears a hood. Like, what are we even dealing with here? And we don't even really understand its ability. And then Mayuri is constantly trying to be like, hey, I don't know what this thing is either. Probably shouldn't get close to it. And then Kenpachi finally just goes and, kicks everything off. There's only so much Kenpachi can be held back when it comes to this sort of thing. But this is one of, if not my favorite fights in the manga. We're actually skipping over a few chapters here. We're skipping over the Basby-Hashwalth fight for now. That'll be added a little later. We do see Basby in this episode. We have like one little scene with the Stern Ritter with Lutato, Giselle, and Basby outside of the Silburn, and it's just kind of like reaffirming, like, hey, Basby, you're gonna go fight Hashwalth, and then Lutato and Giselle are gonna go fight Yuha. And I'm sure that's going to go over swimmingly. But we see that'll be set up later. And in fact, the next episode, going by the title, seems to infer that it's actually going to be the fight between Shunsui and Lilia Barrow is going to start. So this fight does not go all the way through in this episode. That was what I was kind of curious about. Are they going to fit the entire Pernida fight in this episode? Thankfully, they do not. They take a good pace with it. They don't rush through everything. And so the fight is only about halfway done by the end of this episode. And so we get the scene with Mayuri going into his Bankai and having his victory, as it were. So what I'm thinking they're probably going to do is they're going to do this episode where it looks like Mayuri wins, and then the next episode is going to end with looking like Shunsui is going to beat Lilia, and then they're going to maybe do the Basby fight in Hashwalth, and then they go back to it as sort of like, actually, Pernida, survived, and actually Lilia survived, and then the fight begins its second stage. Whereas in the manga, this was all just like all of Mayuri's fight in a series of chapters, then all of Shunsui's fight with Lilia was a series of chapters. I think they're just going to switch it around a little bit here. For those of you following around at home, this will cover chapters. At the end of 635 is when this starts, with Kenpachi really charging at Pernida, and then it ends at chapter 639. Okay, so that's where we're at right now. So let's get right into it. Okay, so Pernida Punkjus, Stern Ritter C, the compulsory, is in the way of Mayuri and Kenpachi's group. Also, keep in mind we have Yumachika, Ikaku, Nemu is there, and Hanataro is there. Although we do not see Hanataro in this episode, that's okay, though, because Kubo, in the Tankobon formats, in between the individual chapters, actually has little sketches of what Hanataro is up to this entire time. So I will actually give you a play-by-play on, even though we do not see Hanataro, what he is doing, okay? Also, side note, but I really want to mention it for the animation, they add Mayuri's luminescence in his, like, armor that he's wearing, and so you can actually see the luminescence kind of glowing on Kenpachi there. They still include that, which is nice. I don't really know if there's much of a point for Mayuri to still be wearing the glowy armor, other than the fact he spent a long time making it and it just looks kind of, well, okay, to say it looks cool on any other human being would be a lie, but it does work on Mayuri is the best way for me to describe it, right? So Mayuri and Kenpachi have a back and forth here of Kenpachi saying stuff like, what is that thing? What's going on? And Mayuri is like, are you asking a question, you barbarian, or are you just talking to yourself? And there's kind of like a back and forth there. Kenpachi's just like, never mind, I'm just gonna go cut it. And hey, I mean, guys, right here, I mean, we see Kenpachi running, and he dodges at the last minute, and his arm doesn't get as wrecked as Yoruichi's, but it gets pretty damn wrecked. So Pernida's ability is to send its nerves into any, I was going to say any living entity around it, but later on in the episode we actually find out that they can send their nerves into pretty much anything. But that's what happens with Yoruichi. You know, the nerves invaded the body and literally begins to contort the body itself and the muscles in your arms until it's just completely shattered and it gets reduced down to like a meatball and a puddle of blood on the floor. So Kenpachi realized this and at the last minute jumped back, but not before also splitting, giving Pernida a splitting headache. This is a joke I remember pretty well back when I was reviewing the manga for this. There's something coming up here I'll try to redo when we get to that scene. But yes, Kenpachi was able to split their head pretty open. And another vibe throughout most of the first half of this episode is Pernida begins to just undulate, and we don't really, this is the mysterious part where we don't really know what's under the hood, what's under the cloak, as it were, and so the body begins to just swell up more, and it kind of looks like a mushroom at a certain point, and there are these tendrils that are kind of shooting out of it. And I remember reading these chapters back in the day, man, and just being completely like, what is this? What is this being going to look like when that cloak finally gets ripped off, you know? Because even the cloak at a certain point, like, expands in size. And it's like, what even is this thing? And then finally, when we get to the giant hand reveal, it's like, oh, okay. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. But part of Pernida's ability is to kind of just change shape, you know, and like, well, we're going to see that throughout the episode here. So there we go. We kind of have the poofy head mushroom-looking Pernida Park Joss here with little tendrils. And then I think we're just going to ease into the opening titles here. Yeah, here we go. Opening titles, awesome. Nemu being cool. I was really excited. I was thinking maybe we were going to get the Nemu scenes in this episode, and we unfortunately do not. Nemu is still there. In the background, just kind of observing everything. But no, we don't get to that part of the fight yet, unfortunately. So sooner or later we will, though. All right. They even bring up there, it's like, yeah, this doesn't look like a useful form for fighting. What is this? And once again, we just go back to Kenpachi and Mayuri, and Kenpachi's just like, I don't know what's going on, and, you know, Mayuri's like, oh, are you just talking to yourself again? He's like, whatever, I don't care. Ikkaku, Yumichika, and Nemu, I think, are being the smart... Well, Nemu was going to stay behind no matter what, because she doesn't usually get involved unless Mayuri orders it. And there's this somberness in Nemu in this episode. And I know that's not really saying much because Nemu always seems rather somber in the background. And, you know, because she's basically just like Mayuri's puppet a lot of times. But this series of chapters in this episode really does go to show, just from Nemu's expression, like, Mayuri has changed since the Soul Society arc. It's very subtle, and let's not get this, like, the wrong way. He's still awful. He's an awful, awful man that's committed, like, horrible war crimes and atrocities, you know, by the truckload. But there is a subtle shift in the way he is valuing Nemu, in the sense that, look back at the fight between him and Uryu during the Soul Society. He basically uses Nemu as, like, just a tool for him to be, you know, in battle. Like, oh, grab Uryu, and then while you're grabbing him, I'll stab both of you. It's okay, because I can just patch you back up after, Nemu. How dare you complain about being stabbed? You know, you think I would let you die? You know, there's even a point where he just starts stomping the shit out of Nemu in that episode, and it's so brutal. And by now we get to the point where Mayuri is actively not asking or requesting Nemu to go help him, even though there are plenty of opportunities where, like, you know, Mayuri during the Soul Society arc would have definitely utilized Nemu as a tool here. Now, there's a little bit of a question of whether or not he's doing this because he actually has feelings, like he actually is beginning to see Nemu as, like, his daughter, and there's, like, a warped sense of, like, okay, I don't want her to die because I'm like her father. Or is it like she is now too valuable to me? Because when we later learn about the like the sleeping number 7, the Nanago, you know, the whole situation there of him creating an artificial being, there's this long list of like failures, like the first 4 didn't even make it out of like the embryonic stage, and the 6th one died when she was like 2 years old, or like her cells broke down. So Nemuri Nanago is like the very first like successful like version of this project. And so it's a question of like, okay, Nemu is now too valuable to me in that respect for I don't want to start over again from scratch kind of thing, right? So you can kind of debate either or if there's a little bit of both there. But Nemu is sensing this change in Mayuri. And Nemu, throughout this episode, even right here when Ikaku and Yumachika are talking about it, Nemu voices her opinion. She says, I agree, we should just stay back here. We shouldn't really get involved right now. And Ikaku and Yumachika are like, whoa, that is weird. You never usually voice your opinion. And Nemu is like, oh, really? I never noticed. I just don't move until he calls me. Now, this is going to be a twist later in the fight, not in this episode, but later in the fight when Nemu does, act without Mayuri's direct permission. And that really also goes to show that she has changed as well since then. And I think Kubo plays this in a way that's not overly dramatic and overly sentimental. It really just goes to show that if like Mayuri was like this much of a horrible person, maybe he's like it's just like decreased just subtly, and it's only like just with Nemu, and that's kind of it. At the very least, he's not going to like, have that scene in the Soul Society where he's like kicking the shit out of her anymore, okay? Like at the very least, we've moved past that, thankfully. But overall, I like the way that Kubo wrote this in. It's not too ham-fisted, and I think it works. All right. So, moving back to the stare down, a lot of this is a stare down, and it makes sense, because Mayuri has actually no idea what Pernida is. Okay, so Mayuri is like, all right, we need to, I am a scientist, I am a man of science, mad science, but even still, I follow a method, a scientific method, the evil version of the scientific method. It is like, I'm gonna stand back and let, like, the crazy barbarian go and charge in and try to fight this thing, and I'm gonna learn a little bit while that happens, So Mayuri is just like, I'm just going to hang out here. I'm not going to rush in. And then, of course, you have Kenpachi's arm that even at a distance now, the arm begins to spin and contort. And dude, Kenpachi is such a damn boss. Like every bone, every muscle fiber in this man's arm is literally just getting ripped to shreds right now. And Kenpachi is more of like, he doesn't even look in pain. He just kind of just like, wait, what's going on with my arm? Oh, that's okay. Well, give me. Well, it's almost like he's like, well, my arm's gonna be fucked, so might as well grab my sword and get that back at least. I don't care if you take my arm, but I need the sword, right? So he, it looks like he is grabbing his sword at first. In fact, in the manga, that's what I originally thought he was doing, like grabbing the sword and ripping it out of his hand. But no, he's literally just grabbing his hand and then just rips out his arm, which he does in the manga too, but it was just like this kind of makes it seem like he's not going for the sword initially. He is initially trying to just rip off his arm with sheer strength. Granted, it's all spun up and it's really like fragile at this point, but still, Kenpachi just grabs his arm and just rips it right out of his socket, throws it to the ground, it gets meatballed, and then he picks up Nozarashi from it. Now, Kenpachi does not use the Shikai of Nozarashi here. I don't really know, like, this is a bad matchup for him, and that's really a big showcase of, like, yeah, brute force and power, and just running in to cut the enemy is not always the solution. Nozarashi is a sword that can cut anything, but as we've seen with Pernida, like, cutting it is not necessarily the end-all, be-all. In fact, cutting it just seems to kind of make it worse. So, yeah, Kenpachi's going to be taken out of commission here in a moment. And so it's like, oh man, that's crazy. Ripped off his arm, and Kenpachi's like, I see. Well, all right then. That just happened. And oh yes, this is interesting. Well, it's a good idea you ripped off your arm. It seems like you have a modicum of a half of a brain cell. Anywho, and Kenpachi once again asks, is like, look, I don't know what's going on. How do we kill this thing? Look, I just need to know where I need to cut it or stab it in order to kill it. Just tell me that. And Mayuri's like, look, I don't know. I don't know what you want me to say. For right now, just don't get close to the damn thing if you don't want to get another limb ripped off. Kenpachi's like, all right. And Nemu even goes up to kind of like, staunch the bleeding. But yeah, no. Kenpachi's just charging in. He's running straight in, and he gets a clean hit. I mean, he stabs Pernida right through the head, right through the noggin, or head is kind of like relative at this point, considering what's going to happen. And this is the point in the manga review I remember very clearly, where Kenpachi stabs Pernida or cuts him and just like, looks like you have a splitting headache. Splitting headache. Fuck your kneecaps. And then Pernida just blows out Kenpachi's kneecaps right there. And it's like, oh man, that's not good. And now Mayuri gets involved and he stabs Kenpachi with Ashisoki Jizo, which, is helping. It is helpful. Hey, it's not just like he gets involved. He helps by stabbing Kenpachi. It is what it is. And Mayuri also says, well, the whole reason I saved him was not because I liked him or anything like that, baka. It's because I need somebody that he has a crazy amount of strength and he can cut things up like no one's business. So he might be more useful to me in the future. So I should probably make sure he doesn't die. So he stabs him with Ashisoki Jizo. Now, Ashisoki Jizo has the ability to paralyze limbs. We've seen this with Uryu's fight. And given Mayuri's sadistic nature, the whole idea is you could still feel pain while that anesthesia is in place. It just numbs the nerves in the limbs. So he uses Ashisoki Jizo's default ability at first. However, that's not really enough, because what happens is, even with the paralysis, basically all the nerves end up doing is then contorting the other parts of the body. So if the arms and legs can't be moved because they're numbed, then Kenpachi's neck just starts creaking over, and it's like, oh man, okay, if I don't do something else, then all of Kenpachi's neck is gonna get snapped right off, just like his arm did, kind of situation, right? And Kenpachi, by the way, has no reference what's going on right here. He's just how dare you, Teme wa Mayuri? How dare you do this? And he's just like, just be quiet. I'm doing science right now. All right, so this is a technique. Everything that Mayuri develops, I've discovered, has to have a face and has to be capable of screaming and showing visceral pain. Every item he pretty much developed that we're going to see in this episode has a face that is capable of showing extraordinary amounts of pain. That is one of Mayuri's trademarks. It's just well, if you don't make a bomb that has a face that can scream when you detonate it, what's the point of being a scientist, I say? So this technique of Ashisoki Jizo is Fear Factor 4. And it's a technique that emits a noise that paralyzes everybody that hears it for longer than 4 seconds. Mayuri and Nemu are obviously immune to this, and you could just, Ikaku and Yumichi could just, close their ears, plug their ears, and so they don't actually get hit by this. But the way to initiate this technique is so, I'm watching this. Mayuri literally shoves his finger into the eyelid of Ashisoki Jizo, which is fully functional, by the way. It's not made of metal. It's like flesh. Shoves his finger into the flesh of Ashisoki Jizo, and then it literally starts bleeding and lets out a cry of a baby. You just stabbed the eye of a baby. Just, just lets out this giant blood-curdling scream. There's no reason to design it like that. You didn't need to do that. Also, dude, I understand from what we learn in this arc that, the Zanpakuto spirits are a fragment of the soul of the Shinigami, right? That is an aspect of this. But, oh my god, poor Ashisoki Jizo. Poor Ashisoki Jizo. You know what I mean? The Zanpakuto spirit that's just constantly experimented upon and, altered and modified by Mayuri. And he just views it as just yes, my Zanpakuto. I will modify it and turn it into a giant baby. It's anyway, so Fear Factor 4 activates. Yumichi and Ikaku, Nemu tells them, hey, plug your ears if you don't want to pass out. So this is what happens to Hanataro. Hanataro is hiding behind a retaining wall somewhere. We don't see him in the episode, but he's hiding somewhere behind a wall. And he accidentally hears it for 4 seconds because no one tells him to not listen. So he actually gets knocked out by this. We just don't see it. But yeah, Hanataro is behind a wall somewhere, just foaming at the mouth on the ground, having convulsions. So, yeah. So Kenpachi goes completely paralyzed after hearing this. I shouldn't even say completely paralyzed because Kenpachi is so damn strong that even after hearing this for 4 seconds, he's still able to, like, move his eyeball. Like, he actually, like, Mayuri goes up to him and Kenpachi's eye kind of shifts like, ah, yes, you're truly a monster, Kenpachi Zaraki. Even after hearing my fear factor 4 for 4 seconds, you could still move. Very impressive indeed. But now Kenpachi is completely immobilized, so the nerves shouldn't have any effect on him anymore, so he's kind of like in stasis. So now it's like, yeah, this guy's wrist strength may still come in handy. Maybe you should rephrase that a little bit, Mayuri. I'm not really sure. That could be taken a couple of different ways. Ah, yes, Kenpachi Zaraki. He can give a handy like no one else. Let's get moving now. We gotta preserve that power. I was like, all right, so... Mayuri figures out it's the nerves after observing it, and he mentions this is not just because of what he saw in the fight just now, but because the Quincy's have the ability to use Bleach, and so they can force their reishi into other people, and they can use it in their own bodies, and so it only makes sense that there would be a Quincy ability to fuck around with the circulatory system, and the nervous system, and the skeletal system, so, you know, Mayuri kind of, like, predicted that this is something you could probably do. You can mess with not just the reishi system of the body, but you can use that reishi to mess around with the biological components like your blood and your muscles and your bones and stuff like that. So he figures this out pretty quickly. You know, and Mayuri is a very arrogant, egotistical dude, so he's going to be constantly talking down to the opponent the entire time. He views as everybody beneath him, and he views Pernida pretty much as a child here. One aspect of Pernida is that throughout the fight, it will slowly gain more and more intelligence, and like its diction and like syntax improve as the fight goes on. Here it is basically completely nonverbal. In a moment it's going to begin screaming, and then later on it will begin to speak simply. Then it gets up to Kenpachi's level of speaking. Then by the end of the battle it reaches the level of Mayuri, because the power of the left arm of the Soul King is advancement or progression, as opposed to the Mimihagi, the right arm, which is stillness. All right, so yes. So Mayuri figures out the gist of the plan and then begins to send the tendrils. And this is another brutal moment where tries to use the nerves. Mayuri just takes out a vat of acid, like a little vial of acid that Mayuri has inside of him, and just douses the damn nerves with acid. And we hear Pernida screaming for like the first time, and it is like a toddler screaming, like, ah! You know, and it's visceral, man. It's hard to listen to, okay? Because it really is like Mayuri is just torturing a child. It's like, ah, does it hurt? Touching pure, undiluted, you know, hydrochloric acid with your bare nerves. It's just like, oh, yeah. So still, horrible person. Let's not forget that Mayuri is awful. Yeah, it's like, ah, the acrid hardship of having your nerves exposed must be truly awful. I'm interested in your power. Let me put you inside of a vat and then put a nameplate on it and begin the experimentation. All right. So, yeah, Kenpachi is still able to stare at him, even though it's pretty amazing that, you know, the fear factor 4 and all that. And Mayuri just takes this as an opportunity to like, well, looks like I need to improve that technique a little bit. Well, whatever. This thing is so cool. It's teaching me all the stuff, all the improvements and modifications I can make with Ashisogi Jizo. So Mayuri is really flying high right now. Mayuri thinks, I've got this in the bag. There is nothing this thing can do that will be able to one-up me. I already figured out its gimmick. Its gimmick is it sends nerves places and invades people's bodies. I'm not going to let that do it to me. I got all these different things in my cloak that I can throw at it. How many more vials of acid do I have? Spoiler alert. Turns out that was the only vial of acid. It's just like... It's just like, hey, Morty, go pick up their weapons. I only have one of those acid things I threw. I'm holding a box of Tic Tacs right now. Like, that's all Mayuri has left. That was his one thing, and he's like, ah, shit, I hope it doesn't figure out that I don't have any more acid. And it's like, yeah, but no, Mayuri has gimmicks. He has toys. He has toys that he can bust out. And so this is where the cloak finally rips, and we get to see, by the way, the soundtrack that's playing, it's like some hard rock remix. I think it might be the first time we've heard it in the, first time in the core, but it also might be the first time in the Thousand Year Blood Warwick we've heard it. It's this awesome, like, and I'm like, okay, this is left arm rock. Not something I would have intended, I would have thought, but okay, let's rock and roll. All right, so here we go. Left arm of the Soul King. Got some cool piercings, got some cool chain piercings around its fingernails. It's got 2 pupils. That's neat. And it's a giant hand. And the giant hand is like, yeah, what is that? Yeah, once again. So the giant hand can also extend. It's not just a hand. The entire arm is part of this. So Pernida's like full form is the arm, and then it kind of like raises itself up. We got a lot of CG in this episode, but raises its arm up and just kind of like floats over the battlefield. I think it's Ikaku or Yumachika that have a very interesting line here. I think it is Ikaku, where they say, man, this monster is the Soul King's left arm. Is the Soul King, like, a giant? Like, how big is the Soul King? Like, it actually does bring up an interesting question, like, you know, Pernida's true form is this giant arm, so is the Soul King's true form, like, a giant? Because we see, you know, Adonias, we see the Rayo inside of the crystal, and he's like a normal-sized person. He's not like a giant, but maybe that's because he's contained in the crystal. Maybe his true power being unlocked, and the Mimihagi was also capable of becoming a giant arm as well. So, yeah, I mean, like, by the way, what happened to the legs of the Soul King? Have the legs of the Soul King ever been referenced? I know in Can't Fear Your Own World we get references to the nails, we get references to the heart, but do the legs ever make an appearance? Does the foot of the Soul King ever make an appearance? Because we clearly see, like, Adonias has, like, it looks like his legs are, like, cut off from, like just above the knee or something. So there are legs walking around out there somewhere. I just don't know where they're at. Yeah, maybe Kubo just didn't want to draw feet for whatever reason. Like, nah, if I had this, like, if Mayuri was fighting against a giant left foot of the Soul King right now, that would probably be going in a direction that maybe Kubo didn't want to go, so he's just like, well, let's make it hands instead. Hands is more symbolic of things. Yeah, sure, okay. And Mayuri does respond to the question. He's like, I have no idea. I've never met the guy. I don't know what he is. I don't know if he's a giant or what this thing is, but whatever. Anyway. However, Mayuri does mention I took a sample of Ryatsu when Ukitake used the Kamekake and then summoned the Mimihagi and everything like that. So he's like, yeah, it seems pretty similar to that. So I had my suspicions, of course. It was probably the left arm. And also going by Kisuke's description, yes, it appears that we are fighting a giant left arm right now. That seems to be what we're doing. Okay, cool. Another little device, another little item that Mayuri has, they're little umbrellas that he shoots out. The umbrellas, I guess, are woven out of human flesh, because when the nerves come in contact with this umbrella, it, like, scrunches in and the umbrella screams. Once again, you don't need to do that. There's no reason to make an umbrella that screams. I think he only uses one of these in the manga. In the anime here, he has a bunch. He just keeps pulling them out, just like, umbrella, umbrella, umbrella. He's like, I'm going through my whole stock of umbrellas fighting this thing, damn it. And every single one of them screams and bloody murder as it's being, like, crunched and killed. I like to think it is, like, everything that Mayuri throws at an enemy does have a level of sentience, like it is alive, if you can call it that, in the sense that it is still able to feel pain. And then Pernida begins to speak. So now its voice is way deeper. Like when it was screaming earlier, it was like a baby. Now its voice is much deeper. Like, it's like, name is wrong. My name, not left hand. My name, Pernida. Pernida Park Jaw. Very like labored and like has to like think about like the enunciation before every single syllable, you know, kind of thing, but is slowly learning more about talking. And Mayuri's reaction, by the way, doesn't... Later on in the episode, Mayuri is like, where's that voice even coming from? How are you even talking? But whatever. Anyway, it's like, your name is Pernida... Pernida... That's too long. I'm the one that gets to discover you. I get to decide what I put on the damn label. I get to decide what's on your jar. And he does say, though, he's like, well, I'll tell you what, actually, since this is a request from the one that is the discovery, I guess I can put the name on there, but I get to decide the spelling. Oh, man, I love that. I love that. I get to decide how to spell it. And you know, Mayuri, if that actually did go all the way through, you know Mayuri would spell Pernida with like okay, you know what it reminds me of? Have you ever seen one of the spellings of Crollo Lucifer from Hunter x Hunter? One of the ways Crollo's spelling is like CYYHLLROLLLO. It's like it doesn't make it. It's like, oh come on, Tagashi. It's kind of like that. That's how he would probably spell. It'd be like PEEEYRINDAA. That's probably how he would like spell it. But anyway. Mayuri still riding on his high horse here. It's kind of hard to tell sometimes whether or not Mayuri is like, oh shit, I'm kind of against a wall here, or he's just being cocky for the sake of cocky, you know, because that's how he is. Like, he's not going to give an inch. Even if he is kind of at a moment where he's like, I'm actually in trouble here, he's not going to let the enemy know about that, you know, even after getting blasted after Uryu's arrow at the Let's Steal back at the Soul Society. He kind of yells at him a little bit like, damn you, you Quincy bastard, and then he just turns to goo, and he's like, well, nicely played, Quincy. You can't hurt me now. I am just ooze. Well, I will now retreat, and you will die. Sayonara. Goodbye. You know, that's kind of the idea there. So that's how Mayuri fights. Not understand what you say. Pernida only got kindergarten education at Sternritter Palace. Hashwolf wasn't great English teacher. Yeah, shouldn't Pernida be speaking German if anything is really what this should be happening? But Pernida is like, well, I don't understand you, but when I don't understand, usually bad things. People insult Quincy's. I attack. So, uses his nerves to summon a giant hand made out of rubble. Mayuri is surprised by this, like, you can even use your nerves in inorganic things. That's cool. Didn't expect that. Nice, man. You can do a bunch of cool shit. I'm gonna really enjoy vivisecting you. I'm gonna Nemu, warm up the old vivisection lab. We're gonna have some fun tonight. It's like, holy shit. I was like, yeah, okay. He uses his extendo arm. What's really cool about this fight is we go back and we get to see like Mayuri's greatest hits. We get to see the extendo arm. I don't think he pulls out the scythe out of his ear, but he does have that. No, I think we actually do see that later on. He pulls out that. He pulls out the extendo fingers, you know, his little clicky fingers that he has. He has like the grappling hook in his hand. Like, it's some cool shit that we get to see that he hasn't used in quite some time. We also see the Hochikazai, the flesh mending drug. This is not in the episode, but later on, Nemu uses this. You know, so it's pretty cool. So we have a cool chase scene, and he realizes, yes, there's nerves everywhere. It's like it's the ultimate game of don't touch the floor. It's made of lava. So we get some cool Spider-Man-esque scenes where Mayuri is jumping around the Varveld here. Eventually has to disconnect the grappling arm, falls down, the giant hands are about to crush him, and we get the cutaways in the episode during this chase scene. The first one is Hieren Kyaku, which Mayuri has actually not used yet in the episode. The cutaway in the episode occurs when the giant hands finally do capture Mayuri, and it looks like, oh no, is Mayuri dead? You know, and Ikaku and Yumachika are looking on like, no, Captain Kurotsuchi, he's dead from that. So here in Kyaku is a little bit of a spoiler, actually. So this is the high-speed movement technique that the Quincy's utilize. This is a flying screen step is the translation I've always seen. You know, it's one of those things where you get a translation for a technique, and even if it's not the correct translation, that's the one that just sticks in your head the entire time. So I always call it flying screen step because I think it sounds cool. But anyway, a high-speed movement technique used by the Quincy's, achieved by riding the flow of reishi gathered beneath their feet. This skill enables rapid mobility across the battlefield. The device embedded in their equipment manipulates the surrounding reishi to solidify the path for movement, making this technique comparable to the Shinigami's Shunpo, the flash step, or the Arrancar's Sonido. This similar technique, despite their differing origins, reflect the versatility of spiritual manipulation in combat. So it's the high-speed movement the Quincy's have. You know, Arrancars have Sonido, and the Shinigami have Shunpo, and actually, in a Club Outside discussion, Kubo actually broke down, there's different stages of Shunpo. Like, you know, there's like an initial step phase, and then a movement phase, and then a stopping phase to Shunpo. So it's actually even broken down even more than that. And then this is obviously a device that Mayuri developed in his shoes in order to activate it. So he basically has hover shoes here. And so that he uses this technique because he cannot use the platform technique that Shinigami usually utilize because of the reishi density and the control that the Quincy's have, but he uses a Quincy technique to combat a Quincy-controlled environment. So Mayuri doesn't go to home field advantage. Mayuri makes shoes that become home field advantage, is basically how that works. And then we have the other cutaway, if I can get to it here. We have Pernida Park Jaws. The script is C, representing the ability The Compulsory. This power allows Pernida to infiltrate the opponent's body through their nerves and possibly and forcibly control their movements. Pernida's script was not a power bestowed by Yuha, but instead an inherent ability tied to its origin. For this reason, Pernida is rumored to be the left arm of the Soul King. So this is something that I don't remember. I think it is explained in the manga that both Pernida and Gerard's abilities were not given to them via Yuha. Usually the process is Yuha will inscribe a letter, a script, onto a Quincy's soul. So he goes to Asnote, for example, who's like a cancer patient dying in a hospital, and he inscribes the F onto Asnote, and that is where Asnote got the power of the fear. So I don't know if Yuha bothered to do the whole script ceremony just because of completion, or if it is more of just a title, like Pernida, you do not need a script, but I will give you the C, the compulsory. It's more of like an honorary title, if nothing else. So they had their abilities first, and Yuha just like, okay, you have the ability to manipulate nerves and to like compulsions, so I'll give you C, the compulsory. Gerard Valkyrie's ability is being able to always kind of come back from the dead, kind of no matter what, to always be the underdog that always rises to the challenge. So your ability will be the miracle, and that's the idea. Right? Okay, so that's where that comes from. Okay, and we also see a little bit more, by the way, of the left arm and how Yuha attained it in Core 2. There's an added-on scene in the anime where we see the meeting between Yuha Baha and Ichibei Hyosubi 1,000 years ago, and that's where Ichibei had the left arm, and it attached to Yuha to seal his abilities, and I guess over the 1,000 years, Yuha just, you know, subsumes it or allows, like, maybe re-educates Pernida to be like, no, you are not left arm, you are Quincy, you are Quincy! You know, maybe something like that. So before we get back to the fight, we do have the brief scene here with Bazby, Latato, and Giselle. There's not much to it. It's just kind of like Latato saying, hey, Bazby, you got your grudge with Hashwolf, right? You know, I'm assuming there's probably a deep-rooted backstory and a grudge between you two. Perhaps you were childhood friends growing up in a village in Germany, and then you wanted to become members of Yuha's army, and then you eventually drifted apart when Hashwolf was chosen as Yuha's, firstborn child or whatever. Maybe it has something to do with that, and you want to kill him. Anyway, you guys have fun with that. You go kill Hashwolf. We'll go take care of Yuha. I love how Giselle is just kind of like, She does say that, like, man, I can't wait to see Hashwolf and Yuha as zombies. That would be so cool. It's like, all right, Giselle, yep, you're a zombie. You're a zombie girl. That's what you do. So anyway, like, we'll take care of His Majesty. You go fight Hashwolf. And Bazby has a little bit of a smirk here where it's like, hey, at least there's some Quincy's in the army that I can still trust. That's the expression I'm getting from Bazby there. Not all the people in this army are going to, like, betray me like, Yuha did and Hashwolf did. There are some people in the army I can trust, and so it's like, cool. That's a nice little scene there. It's like, I want to see His Majesty as zombies, and then Bazby just kind of like, okay, yeah, you guys do that. I mean, hey, really, if you guys can go manage to kill Yuha, I mean, like, if you can do it, if you think you can do it, go ahead. By the way, I just noticed, look at the little tiny hat that Giselle has. It's not even a hat. It's one of those, like, pin things in her hair, right? Like, it has to be one of those, right? I just love that they, like, I guess she made it herself, maybe. Little tiny miniature Quincy hat to, like, pin in her hair. I just noticed that. Okay, anyway. And Latato is canonically the strongest member of the Bambis. So, I mean, hey, if any of the Bambis have a chance to kill you, I guess Latato and Giselle would be the ones to select. But yeah, they're not going to get very far. So they head on into the Silburn, and then we cut back to the battle. So the giant hands, the cement hands that crashed into Mayuri, they explode, but Mayuri's fine. just because he was caught in an explosion doesn't matter. That was just my explosive reactive armor. Because, you know, I rigged my armor to explode without harming me. That's just how science works. So this is the outfit he's going to be in for the most of the rest of the arc. And I actually like this one. I like the little, like, tubes coming out of his face and stuff like that. Dude, I mean, Kubo's come out before and said that, like, Mayuri is, like, his favorite character to draw in the fights, and his fights always ranked really high. I mean, this episode got, like, over a 9, I think it's, like, 9.1 on IMDb. It's not the highest out of the core, not even really. I mean, like, I think The Fire is the highest rated episode on IMDb. I think it's, like, a 9.7 or something. It's, like, really high up there, the fight with Yamamoto and Yuha. But, anywho, like, the Mayuri fights are so damn cool to watch, all right? Yeah. Anyway, he's like, I won't explain how this works. Just look it up in the dictionary yourself under reactive. Look up explosive in the dictionary. That's what I did. Anyway, so he activates Kyaku. So he's like, this looks familiar, doesn't it? I can float around. And then Mayuri, mentions, like, we see Soken very briefly. He mentions that this is a technique this is what Uryu and Soken called it, Kyaku. The original Quincy's, like Yuha, might have a different name for it, but this is what I'm calling it, okay? So he's like, once again, you can't beat me. I can't step on the lava. Ha ha ha. And then he activates another face-shaped explosive that wraps around Pernida's finger, and then he detonates it. It screams and it blows up. This guy is just like, okay, what is the story here? I could think of a couple. Number one, Mayuri took, like, a plus from, like, the world of the living and just turned it into an explosive. Number two, this is a Shinigami in the 12th division that he turned into this thing, because Mayuri definitely experiments on his own men sometimes. Or third, Mayuri took the time to clone a new being. Like, this is kind of a living person, but not really a living person, but enough of a living person that has a face and eyes and a nose and ears and a mouth and is capable of screaming. And he gave it the salaryman haircut. All right, it's just like, oh, well, time to blow up one of your fingers. Oh, God, no, please. Everything in existence is pain. And it's like, if you think about it, Mayuri is actually giving them a mercy by killing them. He's like, I'm going to make items that are so damn painful. They're so in such intense pain to be alive. They're going to be wanting me to detonate them. You know, it's basically, I guess, where maybe Mayuri justifies that. So that blows up, takes out one of Pernida's fingers, lands on the ground. He douses it in this preservation goo. However, the nerves are still active, and another eyeball appears on the finger and begins to constrict around Mayuri. This is a really cool scene where Mayuri then has to do immediate surgery on his arm. And so he, like, gets hit with his right arm gets infected with the nerves. He's like, how dare you? And he takes out his left arm and a sewing thread and a needle and just begins to do immediate surgery, reconfiguring all of his bones and his muscles and his blood vessels. And I don't even know how you do that, but Mayuri can do that. He just rearranged the position of all the nerves, and you can see this is the point where I think Mayuri realizes, oh shit, like, this is one of those situations where if this thing invades my body, I'm kind of fucked. So I can't let that happen. Oh shit, it happened. He got one over on me. He actually can extend the nerves out of separated body parts. Like, the separated body parts still have sentience and, like, autonomy, and they can move around. Didn't expect that. All right. And so he begins to once again saying, do you think you could invade my body so easily? I could just do this. Oh, God damn, that was close. Holy shit. Didn't expect that to happen. And he does mention that it's been a while since I've did an operation on myself single-handedly, so I've lost my touch. So his hand is, like, twitching now. So his hand is, like, not at full capacity. So he's sweating a little bit here. He's like, okay, all right, this is interesting. And now Pernida begins to get a little bit like, shameful. Does that mean you're nervous? Oh shit. Oh man, the giant arms got your number now, Mayuri. What you gonna do now, buddy? He's like, you want to be more nervous? Check out what I can do. And so he starts ripping off fingers, and the fingers begin to expand into more Pernidas, so he can, like, clone himself. So he rips off another finger himself, and so now we're going to have 3 of the damn things, right? It's like, oh, blood in my eye, it hurts. But the fingers on the main body, I don't think grow back. So, like, I guess the limit would be he can rip off all 5 fingers, like 4 fingers and his thumb, so to make 5 separate clones plus the main body. So maybe like 6. But we also see later when they're blasted into separate pieces, they can also maybe reforge. So it is a situation. It's like a black sperm situation from One Punch Man. You know what I mean? Like, how many Pernidas could it actually make? And also, it's a god item. It's a god hand. And it is actually, wait, Pernida is a member of the god hand. Holy shit. You know, there we go. Berserk reference today. But yeah, I mean, like, you know, it's godly powers. Maybe Pernida could make 100 of itself if it really had enough time and it really wanted to and it had enough time to progress. Maybe it could. So this is when Mayuri has a little bit of a flashback. I remember reading a book when I was young. The right hand of the Soul King governs stillness, and the left arm represents progress. Okay. Little bit of a Club Outside reference I want to make here. So remember how it was stated that Senjumaru was involved in the 12th Division in some way, but this would have been long before Kisuke created the Research and Development Division, and even long before Kiryu Hikefune was involved. So Kubo goes into a little bit of this in Club Outside of like how Mayuri ended up in the Maggot's Nest and everything like that. So long ago, the 12th Division did have, it was sort of like they invented things in the Soul Society. They were not an R&D division. It wasn't as built up as it is now, but it was like they created new things. And Senjumara Shutara was the head of that group, and Mayuri was part of that group, okay? And then something happened where Senjumara was, you know, recruited to become a member of the Soul Palace, and then Mayuri was thrown in the Maggot's Nest, and then years go by, Kiryu Hikefune becomes the captain, and then eventually she gets promoted to go up to the Soul Palace. Kisuke Uehara takes over, and then he frees Mayuri to become his third seat, okay? And then Hiyori was the lieutenant, right? So that's kind of how this goes in terms of timeline. So I imagine this is back when Mayuri was maybe working under Shutara. This was kind of, you know, that timeline, that period. This is also how he looks when Kisuke finds him in the Maggot's Nest. Yeah. But anyway, he says that the knowledge you learn in books is just knowledge. I'm more of a hands-on, witnessing it with my own eyes kind of situation. Oh my God, we got a lot of hands. That is entirely one too many left hands that people can have. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I know in JoJo's we had a character with 2 right hands, but now we have 3 left hands. That's way too much. So Mayuri decides, like, I think this is the moment where Mayuri is like, I need to win this. I need to kind of wrap this up. I'm not going to say that I need to wrap this up, but this has the potential to go really south really quick. I'm just going to use Bankai, and I'm going to wrap this up and then win the fight. Hopefully, because if I keep playing with this thing, it's going to be problematic, okay? Because I think he's realizing that it's getting smarter and smarter as it's going, and it's like this is a problem for a drawn-out fight. So he kind of squeezes the little stress ball of his Zanpakuto and activates Bankai! And so Ikkaku and Yumachika believe it's just going to be ordinary, run-of-the-mill, vanilla Konjiki Ashisogi Jizo, which is the giant caterpillar baby thing that spews poison gas everywhere. So they start running away. Mayuri is like, ah, yes, you fools. You don't understand the true magic of my science. And he makes a giant, fat, like, obese, bald baby that can also give birth to other babies. You know, I didn't realize until watching the anime episode how gross this fight was. like, you know, watching part of this, especially in the scene we're about to give to here, where this thing just, like a cesarean, just a C-section, just cracks open and just like a demon golden baby crawls out of this thing's gut. I'm watching this and I'm like, oh God, this is kind of shit that doesn't come across right in the manga of just how gross this fight is with Mayuri, okay? This is Konjiki Ashisogi Jizo Matai Fukin Shotai. It's the demon womb wrapped in disease. So how this works is he's modified his Bankai so that he can send information to it during the battle. And then using that information, this Ashisogi Jizo can then, this parent Ashisogi Jizo, can give birth to a new Ashisogi Jizo that is specified exactly to counter all of the information that he sent to it. So this entire time it's going on, Mayuri is like, okay, Pernida can manipulate nerves, and it can rip off its own body and expand, and it can manipulate inorganic material, and he's sending all that information into it. And I'm actually gonna skip over some of this here. There we go. Yeah, that's what happens. It just crawls out of the womb, and it's just this big golden baby. And Mayuri specifies, oh, by the way, I installed nerves on this thing's skin that are super, super sensitive. So even touching the air and being in contact with the ground will be excruciatingly painful for this new being. But let's not worry about that right now. That's neither here nor there. And this thing is like screaming its head off as it's in constant agony. But when the nerves are fired at it, it has 70,000 epidermal layers of nerves covering its flesh. So even hitting it with a nerve doesn't matter. It'll just peel off and it'll be no big deal. And then like it just charges, like see right here, it just peels right off and then it just heals back, no big deal. And so it just charges in and just starts just devouring the giant hands whole. And so also the size of this thing has to be comparable. So just devouring Pernida. Mayuri's like, oh, come on now. You can at least resist a little bit. You can fight this. Whatever. It doesn't matter. And Pernida is screaming as well, like, no, what are you doing? Oh, no, please. What the hell? And the Ashisoki Jizo devours all of the arms, and Mayuri lets out a mighty scream of victory. Nemu is off to the side like, Mayuri-sama, you have definitely changed. And Ikaku and Yumachika pick up Kenpachi, and they're looking at this. And so we end out the episode with Ashisoki Jizo just finishing up dinner, and then Mayuri just screaming like, I did it! I am the ultimate scientist! Baby, hold your hand. All right, there it is. Okay, this episode was... it was a little much. And then the end here, we don't get a post-credit scene. Oh, there's Nemu. But we get the poem, which I believe is read by Lilia Barrow, because it makes references to Buddha, and that is a reference that Lilia Barrow and his ability makes, like opening his eye. And then we get the next episode, which is going to be Don't Chase a Shadow. And that is a reference to when Shunsui's using his shadow ability against Lilia. So I guess we're going to get that in the next one. So might maybe open up the next episode with a recap of this and like show that maybe the fight isn't quite over yet, but then we're going to move over to Shunsui. If nothing else, I don't think we're going to have the conclusion with this next episode. I doubt that's how it's going to go. But yeah, really good one. I was worried they were going to cram it all into one episode and they would have to rush through it like super, super fast to get through everything. But no, it was paced really well. And it had to be paced that way because when you finally get to the end of the episode, when you have the moment where Mayuri kind of realizes like, oh, I am kind of being bested here. And then he goes into his Bankai and he's so cocky and so arrogant. Like, I've done this. I've won. That is the moment where it has to be like ripped away from him. That's the moment at like the end of the chapter where he thinks he wins, but he doesn't. And we see that. I think it's the end of chapter 639 here when Mayuri activates his Bankai and then he is shouting and screaming like, I've done this. And then Nemu is just looking on like, I'm not really sure about this. It might not be over yet. Right. But anywho, that is BAN-KAST episode 34. Thanks for watching, everybody. Go to make sure to check out on Spotify and Google Play, all that good stuff. And I will be back here next week at some time to cover Bleach episode 35. Thanks for watching, everybody. Tekking, signing out.